Okay, do you want me to? Okay.
Wait,
Ceremonial,
what about Michelle? We got 2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay, all right.
Michelle should be running.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
You might have to move back down, so Michelle can sit closer, sorry.
Oh,
Oh my gosh.
Mayor won. I mean, she.
I'll give up my.
We will call the planning commission meeting of June 1st, 2022 to order. I will start by calling the roll. So I am Chair Lindsay, present. Vice Chair Chesterton is absent this evening. Commissioner Coletta.
Present.
Commissioner Evans is absent this evening. Commissioner Sanper. Present. Commissioner Vitaki.
Present.
Mayor Hodges.
Present.
And our Secretary, City Manager Seisland.
Present.
Okay. And we have City Attorney Erica Schott with us here tonight. Present. There you go. The teacher in me is so happy with us. Present. All right, the first order of business that we have is the approval of the April 6th meeting minutes. If everyone has had the opportunity to take a look at those minutes.
I move approval.
Okay, I have a motion from Mayor Hodges. Do I have a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. And our next item agenda is public comments. We are going to have public comments tonight on our agenda item, which is the master plan public hearing. So if there are any members of the public that would like to speak to the master plan. Okay, sir, just please state your name and your address.
Paul Mazer, 30 Point Park Place across the street. In a way, it does have to do with the master plan, it has to do with the green space. And it's related to a gentleman that was on your commission for over 30 years named George Helen, the 60s into the 90s. And together with Mayor Heenan, they collaborated on what is called the Jefferson Avenue Renewal Program, which gave us the beautiful landscaping across the street with the nice clock tower for Vern Osherman's 20-year service on the committee, on this commission, on the council. The islands, there's green space over there, our condo building, which provides landscaping. And if you drive all the way down Jefferson, all the way to Caddy, on both sides, the north and south sides, you see what residents in the park have done. It's all beautiful green, these are nice lawns, well manicured, trees, beautiful bushes. On the south side, you have two beautiful berms. One in particular that's just in the block right after the Bedford stoplight, and another one further on. But it's all beautiful. And the only thing that does not fit in with that plan is to have a parking lot here in what should be a green space. And with the replication of that landscaping and a monument to Jim Robson, who served 28 years on the council and 6 years on this planning commission. And then you have it running along the driveway, by the library, that space for the kids to play, and a monument for Jim is what I feel is. Now, as far as the parking availability for the theater and for the Arts Center, more than enough parking is there at Merritt Academy and at St. Ambrose lots. That there's no need to have a parking lot there. Parking lot is ugly. There's no. There was a resident that found a statistic from the National Justice Society, a governmental justice society, that 10% of all crime occurs in parking lots. There's been enough crimes that resulted in public safety arrests at Windmill Point over the years that I'm aware of. So put a parking lot there, the same thing could happen. But having something that would be worthy of a foundation, then replicating that and having a monument for Jim Robson and still have the ability for the neighborhood families to play. We've got all kinds of events going on. You've got a teacher from the school that brings the class over and has an outdoor class. You've got people from the daycare on both sides of Jefferson that come over and play there. All kind of families playing. Maribel won the award there. She practices lacrosse there. You're taking away her lacrosse player. But this is, it's an area, for the, for the residents to enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Ron Porter and I live on Pemberton Road. And I'm here to speak in support of adoption of the Grosse Pointe Park Master Plan. I recall several years ago when Ms. Hodges was on the council and had voted to approve the building that's now will be the new public service building. On Mac, she noted the planning process had maybe not worked perfectly in that regard, but that the city would make changes and we would have best practices going forward. And I want to congratulate the city for actually doing that. You folks went out, you hired experts, you got a lot of community feedback. I know I went to online meetings, I went to Tompkins Center, I took surveys, I provided email input, and I know hundreds of other park residents did that as well. And all that information went to very professional, very well-respected urban planners who have a lot of experience and have demonstrated success planning cities that are like ours. And so now the right thing to do is, having followed this very good process, is to adopt what the experts recommend. No one goes to a doctor with a medical problem and says, hey doc, I've got this problem. I want you to get a plan to help me get well. And then if you leave the doctor's office and you go home and you say, I know better than that silly doctor, you're not likely to have a good result. And I think that's what will happen here. We've hired experts, we've gotten a lot of community input, and we ought to adopt the plan that the experts recommend based on the input from the resident and the support of the city administration. Now, there will be people who have individual concerns. I do. It's not perfect. If I were king, I would do something a little different. And I imagine that's true of everybody here and everybody out there in Grosse Pointe Park. But we've got a very good plan. We ought to adopt it. And in particular, there's one recommendation that I want to urge the Planning Commission to go forward with, and that is a housing survey. We need new residents. We need to broaden our appeal to people from basically people with families, to both younger people and people who no longer have children, and allow both people on both ends of the age spectrum to come to Grosse Pointe Park and find reasonable housing that meets their needs. In my situation, I'm just about to retire. Now I'm lucky, I have a smaller house, I have a 3-bedroom house, so I can age in place. But there are a lot of people who can't do that and need to find a different housing situation. And so we need to take stock of what our residential housing situation is, and we need to plan for the future so that we can attract a broader base of residents and expand both our tax base and expand the attractiveness of our city. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no other public comments, I do want to note, just pull out the names. We did receive a few emails from residents. So I just want to note, I want to make sure that I have names correctly. We did have emails from Ms. Mary Rouleau in support of the master plan. We also had emails from, apologies, Ms. Leah Greenwell in support of the master plan. Also had an email from Ms. Amanda Metz in support of the master plan, specifically encouraging zoning improvements as in relation to childcare facilities. So thank you to those 3 residents who sent in emails their support. And if there are no other public comments, then we are going to move on to the public hearing portion. So I'm going to turn that over to City Manager Sisler.
Yes, so thank you, Chair Lindsay. So before us tonight will be a presentation from MKSK. Joined with us are Brad Strader and Anne Marie of MKSK, who will give us a brief overview of the master plan and what was done with it, and for us to listen and review and provide comments and suggestions, and then we will open up for more public comment on regards to the master plan. So with that being said, Brad and Anne Marie, the floor is yours.
Thank you again, Brad Strader from MTSK. Nice to see you all. And glad to be here for the public hearing. I'm just going to touch on a few things about the master plan and turn most of the presentation over to Anne Marie, who took over when I had an illness about 1.5 years ago, and I was going to be very involved, and she stepped right up and took over, but I've stayed involved throughout, kind of behind the scenes, but nice to be back here again. So what is the master plan? And this is generally set up mostly for the public, as I know most of you know this and have seen some of the language in the master plan document itself, but it's basically a long-range comprehensive guide for the city's physical future. So it looks at land use, relates to zoning, transportation, and at a high level of infrastructure. So not like maintenance and so forth, but high level infrastructure, changes to infrastructure. And it looks to 10 to 15, maybe 20 years in the future to see what the changes are going to be, looking at trends and so forth. Some of the things that the residents just brought up this evening. You should look at changes in housing and other data. How does the city adjust to retain its vitality? So the idea of a plan is kind of a combination. Again, it was stated very eloquently a few minutes ago, but it's kind of there's a technical evaluation to bring in experts. We're very happy that we had the chance to work with you and looking at best practices from other cities that are similar to Grosse Pointe Park, other places in Michigan and around the country that have some of the similarities here. And then there is a technical evaluation to look at the demographics and data and housing and traffic and volumes and so forth, and see what are the values of the community, what do the trends tell us, and what are some things that the city can have in its strategies to respond to those changes in the future. And make sure that we respect what's here and that we embellish and make it a better place to live in the future. Again, attracting new people and continuing the vibrancy again. This is an opportunity for the Planning Commission and for City Council to come to an agreement on the master plan and guidance and strategies and priorities, which I think you've all spent a lot of time looking at that. There are some requirements also that are in the Planning Act. So the Michigan Planning Act outlines the role of the Planning Commission in the adoption of the master plan process and going through the public hearing process. And it's sort of a little bit vague on public engagement. And it just says you have to have a public hearing and you may have more additional public engagement. You had a lot of public engagement. I think you've done a great job of surveys and workshops and getting people input, social media and so forth. So we've clearly met the requirements and exceeded the requirements of the Planning Act. Then there's the Michigan Economic Development Corporation has a program called Redevelopment Ready Communities, RRC. And there's a certification process to go through that. And a couple of things that are in that checklist dealt with the master plan and having language in the master plan and strategies to deal with some of the things that are important to the MEDC. So that makes you eligible for the MEDC funding. But a lot of their ideas are just really good practices anyway, and things I think the city would have done even if there wasn't an MEDC requirement for certification. And then a lot of input from the public and stakeholders. So the public and stakeholders, some have a vested interest maybe in their neighborhood or their block, but they also have a vested interest in the city overall. And you as a planning commission take all this information and individual comments from the public and stakeholders with what you know and look to the future to come up with the recommendations of the plan and the action plan and strategies. So why did Grosse Pointe Park needs a new master plan? Because I think there was some discussion, even at the interview we had, why do we need one? And it was one of the questions that maybe helped us get the job, because we thought there were a lot of reasons for the city to update their master plan. Certainly it's a requirement in the Planning Act and for RRC certification and so forth, but what does the city really need a new master plan for? Because aren't you largely built out? What do you need to look at in the future? Well, there's lots of changes that are happening in terms of demographics and need for missing middle housing or attracting new families or aging in place, looking at bicycling and walking and making sure this is a more walkable, bikeable city and safe city, looking at infrastructure, looking at beautification, even the great neighborhoods you have, there's always something that can enhance those neighborhoods that could be part of the master plan. And this was an opportunity for the public to say what's really great here and what are some things they think could be updated in the future. So I think that is part of why the master plan was done. I think sometimes a built out community like Grosse Pointe Park or Birmingham or East Grand Rapids is a harder plan to do than if you're in a township that has all this land and say, here's the land uses. That's kind of easy. Pick out a land use map. Work on a lot of those. But this is really neighborhood by neighborhood, street by street, looking at what are the precise things that need to be done in the future. How does it affect zoning? And every chance opportunity you have here is going to be magnified because you don't have a lot of new development coming in. So you have to really have good master plan and policies to make sure you make really good decisions on site plans and rezonings and so forth. There's some discussion in the master plan about zoning ordinance and some discussion here from the surveys that we need to really update the zoning ordinance. So the zoning ordinance needs to be based on a master plan. So we put into place master plan support for changes to zoning. So now you can go forward with making the zoning ordinance changes and it's based on the master plan. So it's another reason to have a new master plan. And then there's some infrastructure improvements and capital improvements that are outlined in here. And again, the law says it should first be in the master plan if there's major capital investment or infrastructure improvements. And again, I already mentioned the MEDC redevelopment ready community program. So those are just some of the reasons to do a master plan. You brought up many other reasons for the doing the master plan. We certainly heard a lot from the public about things that need to be in the master plan and recognize they think the importance for updating a master plan. So that's kind of just an overall background, and Anne Marie's going to go through sort of a summary of the process we went through in the engagement and the action.
Thanks, Brad. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you in person again. So throughout the master plan process, we did set up multiple engagement opportunities, as Brad mentioned, both virtual and in person when we got the chance when there were vaccines available. We really did this to help provide education to the public about the planning process, but then also give an opportunity for their input. The master plan update process began in early 2021, and we used the previous draft master plan from 2019 as a starting point, and then we began to identify challenges, opportunities, and priorities from the community and stakeholders. This slide shows a summary of the engagement efforts that took place throughout that process. So we had the virtual community visioning session in February 2021. Right after that, we released the online survey, which is also available by paper. And then we had interactive map comments available on the project website. And then last May, we had a community open house event at the Grosse Pointe Park. And that allowed the community to come in person, ask questions. We took a little bit deeper dive into the trending topics. And then we had a meeting with the Planning Commission last October to review the draft master plan. And right after that, we had that community-wide priority ranking survey that we sent out so the community could weigh in on what the priorities were for the action plan. And then we sent out the plan to be reviewed by adjacent communities and agencies. And then again, another opportunity tonight to give public comments. And then this is just a summary of some feedback we heard. It's certainly not all of it, but just some examples that we heard over time. And we heard that Grosse Pointe Park would like, people in Grosse Pointe Park would like to improve business districts, retail and restaurants, better communication from the city to residents, more transparency, enhance diversity in the city, and update the parks. And then for the business districts themselves, develop vacant properties, especially along the Charlevoix Business District and Neck Avenue, improve public parking, especially along Kirchhoff, and enhance streetscapes. And we included an example here from the parking study that we completed for the city in December, and it just kind of shows we were listening to the community. We started
implementation already before the plan's even done. But the city now can use the findings and recommendations from this plan to really start improving the public parking system in the business districts. And then one of the most important tools from the master plan is the future land use map. So this map provides guidance on land use decisions, zoning decisions, developments, decision-making, Rosebank Park. We developed character areas that each have unique development characteristics and guidelines. So things like the types of land uses you would find in each of those categories, types of parking, open space. And the future land use is divided into 5 general categories. So we have residential neighborhoods, mixed residential neighborhood, which is really concentrated around the business district areas. That's where you're going to find higher density residential and mixed in with duplexes. And then we have parks, institutions, and then finally the business districts. And then we also integrated design guidelines into the master plan process. And we have residential design guidelines and commercial design guidelines. Each of these have a little bit different criteria, but essentially are achieving similar things so that when you have rehabs and infill development, they're following a certain set of design guidelines that are, following what you see in the business districts today and the existing neighborhoods, so they're compatible with those other areas. I do want to note here that the guidelines in the master plan are guidance only, but they can be tweaked and codified to be part of your zoning ordinance update. And then one of the main topics we heard comments on was the transportation recommendations to make enhancements to the existing transportation system in Rosebank Park. The map you see here on the right-hand side is a collection of recommendations for pedestrian crossings, for new and enhanced crossings, especially along the commercial corridors. I just want to point out, for example, Mack Avenue, there's not that many lights between Weyburn and Cadieux. There's not a lot of opportunities for safe crossings for pedestrians. So we did make recommendations for some mid-block crossings along there, as along with other like Jefferson and I think Brenner and Charlottesville as well. And then for adding bike facilities, we either have adding bike sharrows, signage, or bike lanes along select corridors in the city. So we really paid attention to, where do you need your existing parking to remain? We have an example here of Kirchhoff Avenue where we are recommending a bike lane, but it's outside of the business district because we know that parking is really coveted in the business district, and it's really an important part of that being a vibrant place. And then as part of the master plan, we also incorporated sustainability and infrastructure recommendations to help protect natural resources and encourage more sustainable practices in the city. We also noted in the existing conditions section of the plan about the flooding events that occurred last summer and the steps that the city is already taking to address those issues. Some of the recommendations in this section included replacing lead water service line to comply with the new regulations, addressing improving storm and sanitary sewer flow and collection, adding electric vehicle charging stations in city parking lots, and shifting and adding more green infrastructure in the city, especially in parking lots and within the right of way, and then launching a program for recycling education. And then we also have a zoning plan in place, and this is a requirement by the state, but it's just also very important for you to have, especially since you're looking to update your zoning ordinance. As Brad indicated, you want to make sure your zoning ordinance is based on your master plan recommendations. So we reviewed it, the zoning ordinance and the zoning map to make sure it's more consistent with the master plan. We made some recommendations, and those include streamlining and making the zoning ordinance more user-friendly. Some examples include creating some more graphics so that your dimensional standards are more visual, and it's easier for both applicants and reviewers to easily just be able to see what those standards are. Creating tables for parking and use tables, so it's really easy to find what uses are allowed in each of the districts. We also included some zoning map recommendations. So the zoning map is mostly appropriate for Grosse Pointe Park, but we did find a few areas that could be tweaked. So we recommended adding a parks and civics use district to help protect those uses, and also switch the parking and office service districts to be part of the local business district to make that more consistent and provide more flexibility for future redevelopment opportunities. And then we also included suggestions to revise the parking standards to help accommodate and preserve walkable business districts, and then incorporate mixed uses into the permitted uses in the business districts, and then provide some provisions for sustainable standards to help capture stormwater runoff in residential and commercial areas in the city. And obviously that's a very important topic, especially for Grosse Pointe Park. And then the last section of the master plan is the action plan. This is going to be the section that you're going to point to the most and use the most when you are implementing the plan. We recommend that Planning Commission revisits this on an annual basis, and you can create a report that goes along with it that really shows what have we accomplished so far this year, and then what are our changes to the action plan. Do our priorities change? Are there new things that we need to be looking at that aren't part of this action plan? And the action plan will be your guidance for those goals and strategies, and it includes prioritization of those steps and also identifying who to partner with to achieve those goals. And this table just shows the elements of the action plan and the goals. And if you like, I can bring up the actual action plan once you're doing your discussion of the master plan. And we can go through some of those action items if you need to go into those more detail. And I also wanted to review the summary of changes to the draft plan. So the last draft was done in October of 21, and we have since revised it for the April 2022 version. And this is based on Planning Commission's review of the plan. So you split up into working groups last winter and reviewed the draft master plan, and then that also included reviewing the priority ranking survey that was sent out to factor that information into your review. And then you held a working session in April to decide and vote on those changes. So a summary of those changes includes making updates to the existing conditions section of the plan to reflect 2020 census data that was available. Unfortunately, a lot of that data is not available still. When we actually did the existing conditions chapter for this plan, that wasn't even available when we were doing it. So we did make updates. They still just don't have all that information available. But we did update the population information, employment, and income information for you. And then we added more planned city infrastructure projects that would happen over the next 5 years. And we made some minor map updates to the existing land use map and community destinations map to reflect what we heard at the April meeting. And then revisions to the priorities in the action plan. There were around 20 total priority rankings that we changed for those objectives based on recommendations made by Planning Commission. And then we clarified it or added language to several of the objectives to add more detail and steps. And then we added more partners to several of the objectives and then clarified city responsibilities. So before we were just showing where it would just say like city and responsible partners. And now we're showing who at the city is that responsible partner. Is it city council, city administration, planning commission? So it's easier for you then to implement it when it comes time to implement that particular objective. And that is our presentation. So if during your discussion you decide to make changes to the plan, those can be noted and then put into an addendum to the plan. And then if you take action tonight, then it would proceed forward to city council for adoption. So I just want to thank you again for the opportunity, and it was great to work with all of you, and really we're happy to address any questions we had.
Thank you so much, Brad and Anne Marie. We really appreciate you being here and all of the work that you've put in over the last 18 plus months on this. So I will entertain if there are any commissioners or the mayor, do you want to start with any questions or comments or discussion?
Sure, I can say, hi Brad, I don't know if you remember, but I was a student at Michigan State, who's a starry-eyed urban planning student, who always looked up to Brad Strader. It was a few years ahead, so I think that was how many years ago? But it's great to be back in the room with a fellow Spartan, so, and thanks for all the work that you've all. Oh, you are too, Emery, cool. Should have put that in your interview. But yes, I would certainly like to thank you for all of your work, thank this body for all of its work, also the previous planning commission as well. Certainly a lot of work went into the original document and that there, so thank you to them for their leadership on that. And I know having reviewed this current draft, I was certainly pleased to see some pretty significant changes that I felt were important. Most notably, the need to assess our property inventory that we hold and making sure we are planning for that. Improving the priority of the infrastructure and adding elements there as well, calling out the border points and the need to be working collaboratively with our neighbors and focusing on those areas. Trombley, of course, is certainly very important. And I think those were all of the big things that I had, in addition to seeing the 2020 data and really looking to the MEDC as well for guidance and direction as we move forward in professionalizing our community and ensuring a bright future. So as was pointed out earlier, it's never a perfect document, and each of us are going to have our own opinions. One for me that I would change if I were queen would be the bike lanes. I think bike lanes are very important, as is mobility, but, and actually maybe I should ask a question. When we define high priority, what does that mean in terms of the timing standpoint? Is that implementable in the next year because it's high priority, 2 years, 3 years, or how was that that assignment really made?
Madam Chair to the Mayor. So I think it's really, again, you can change the priority levels if you wish when it comes time to do your review, but it's ultimately just indicating that this is really important to our community. Sometimes the timeframes don't always match up with the priority level because it could be something that takes longer to implement, right? Because if you're implementing a bike lane along Mack Avenue, for example, you're going to have to coordinate with Wayne County and the city of Detroit, and it's going to take a little longer to get through that process. So there's multiple factors at play in terms of the time frame.
Great, that helps, because I certainly wouldn't want our administration to be conflicted at some point. If we have a choice between a sewer or a bike lane, we're going to pick the sewer in the next 12 months. But obviously, communities need to be mobility minded and have all modes implemented. So it's not at all a question of whether or not those need to happen. It's just when and which set of resources. Because again, the administration might be saying, oh, we're doing an improvement on Jefferson. Now's the time to address bike lane issues as well. So just wanting to have that flexibility and never wanting to be in a position where you have to choose between the sewer and the bike lane. So it's always going to be sewer in my mind.
It's always gonna be sewer.
So with that, then I'm comfortable with the document. Appreciate the opportunity to be heard. Look forward to my colleagues' thoughts as well.
Perfect. Commissioner Coletta.
Thank you for all the work you've done. It's great. I am impressed by how thorough everything is, and I'm impressed by just how professional everything is and has been for the entire process. I think it's wonderful. That's all I have.
Commissioner Sandper.
Jump all the way to S.
Yeah.
I echo that. Thank you for all of your hard work, but I also want to thank the community for being so engaged in this process. I think you mentioned early on, it's very high engagement rate overall at Grosse Pointe Park Night. So thanks to everyone, especially obviously we were in challenging circumstances and having to do a lot of things virtually. And I think that engagement from the community and bringing in from MKSK really reflects this document that we have here. It's going to have this roadmap for our city in the next 5-10 years. I look forward to working on getting things implemented that are in here. I'm really excited about some of the changes and items that we can do to continue to attract people to move to this area and to invest.
Thank you. Commissioner Jackie.
I too thank you both, and I would give the plan very high marks for the bulk of it, which is, you know, the facts and figures and the data. I think that's very interesting and useful. Design backgrounds, all that stuff is good. I guess I'm a little more concerned than others about the divergence of the action plan to the community input. So I guess I'll start by noting that I did not see the summary of the survey results, either survey result attached to this, which was fine for me because I had copies from before, but I didn't see it on the website for the public to review, and I'm not sure if the council's seen it. So I guess I'd ask if we do vote to advance it, that that be included in the appendix. Because these reference, I think, on page 3. You know, the second survey in particular, is, as you know, you took sort of the action plan and the recommendations and just sort of phrased them in the form of a question for the community. And so it's a pretty easy exercise to look at the priority that's in the plan draft and then look at what the community said. And I understand it's not going to be completely aligned 100%. But when I went through and just compared and contrasted, like half of the items had priority that was different from what the community said. And sometimes it was just off by one, like there was a low versus a medium here or something like that. But there are other cases where the community input was literally opposite of the priority that we had in this plan. Like the plan still shows it as a high priority. And the most prevalent response from the community was, we don't want to do it at all. And the second most prevalent response was low priority. And then you got the opposite effect. There were certain things that the community overwhelmingly said should be a high priority, and it's not a high priority here. So that's a concern for me. You know, I'm not going to belabor it. I just don't feel comfortable sending a plan to the council that has priorities in it such that they may eventually be in a position where they're going to have to respond to, you know, be guided towards working on things that the community clearly said they don't want, and then maybe not work on things that the community clearly said they do want. So I'm sensitive to Mayor Hodges' remark that, well, there's flexibility there, but I think that leaves us open, or leaves the council open, not so much us, but the council open to conflicting priorities in the future. So again, I won't belabor that because I brought it up before. So I guess I'll finish there.
Thank you, Commissioner Jackie. I do want to say, you know, to your point, I think that's important to take into consideration, and that as has been recommended, that we move forward with an annual review of the master plan so we can take a look at the action items, which items has council moved on, you know, what perhaps is next on their agenda, and then we can offer some guidance and input too. So I think having that review and assessment and kind of collaboration between the planning commission and city council will be helpful. And that also will give the community a chance to see, as the plan, you know, moves forward, what action items, you know, that they were mindful of, and gives the community a chance on an annual basis too to have some input. So just to offer up that as well. I do not have any further comments, just to echo that we deeply appreciate all the work that's been done on this by everyone, by MKSK, by the city administration, public that has contributed. And again, I look forward to seeing a few items in particular. You know, I know that we've had discussions, Andrew Sizen and I have had discussions about updating the zoning plans in particular. And I think will be really very beneficial to both our residents and our local businesses. So I think that. So our next, are there any other comments, city manager? I'm sorry, I didn't just over you.
No, that's okay. It's certainly, a lot of work was done by administration, all staff, department heads across from the city really had a lot of input with this plan as well. And, certainly I think it was challenging for a lot of us to flexibility with COVID and then meeting virtually and how the plan was presented. We initially met in person, I believe, when we first started this, and then pandemic hit. And, just that flexibility working with MKSK was really well done, and something that I thought was really important to this community. And I found it very great that at the Window Point open houses we had was a really great opportunity for this community to really provide their input. And that was a lot of fun to have. And just want to thank you guys and previous city councils and previous planning commissions that all had a little bit of input in this. And I think this will give us good guidance for moving forward. So.
Is there any additional public comment now that you have seen the presentation from MKSK? Seeing that there is none. The next item on our agenda is resolution of approving and adopting the city master plan. So we have a bit of a change in the agenda. We are not going to be voting tonight on the adoption of the master plan. In discussion with City Manager Seisland and with our City Attorney Shell, just looking at the guidelines from the Michigan Planning Act, we do feel that it would be best practices to have the full Planning Commission present. One of our commissioners could not be here because of rescheduling a death in the family. Another commissioner is currently at the Mackinac Conference. So those were absences that could not be avoided at this present time. What we've discussed is having a special meeting of the Planning Commission. Obviously, we would like to do that as soon as possible when everyone else is back in town. So just to the fellow commissioners, I don't know if we can set a date tonight. I know we have a very important graduation coming up soon. So I'd like to do that beforehand. How would you like to proceed on picking a date?
I'm about to pull up the city calendar
Okay.
right
We also
now
have
and
one.
see what other potential meetings we have. I do know I have the Downtown Development Authority meeting coming up. So let me today's the first, right? Yeah, okay, so,
And then Nick, I would just keep in mind that you have to push out the notice of the special meeting with the appropriate function. So,
Okay,
Right,
so we
yeah.
need,
like, it can't be tomorrow.
right, no.
yeah,
Is it 14 days?
I want to make sure. I'm counting the right number of days.
And
Which
this,
would mean we're not gonna get the June 13th. Council.
Well, no,
Do we have to do the 15th again, or is it just? the-
yeah, that's a
I
public
would
hearing,
say for a
right? Yeah.
rescheduled regular or special, this is from the Open Meetings Act, rescheduled regular or special meeting of public body, public notice shall be posted at least 18 hours.
Yeah.
I would advise more than 18 hours.
Yeah.
Since we're planning it now.
yes.
Let's see, what day is the 7th? Tuesday, Warren?
It was a Tuesday.
Pull up their phones. I was gonna say, I know, well, you,
Tuesday is the 7th.
Commissioner
Yes.
Sandier, often travels.
But I really travel.
You don't have any travel, okay.
Yeah.
Which day?
What about the 6th, the Monday, or Wednesday, the 8th?
Would it be 7 o'clock for sure?
Yep,
Wednesday's graduation. It doesn't matter.
okay, so
Maybe
Wednesday's not.
after. Graduation?
That's in the evening.
No.
Yep.
Agenda packets, agenda packets for the council meeting. to go out.
Yeah, so those go out
And one is-
Thursday.
Monday might be,
Could we do Monday? I'm flexible, I'm in town. Mike, are you?
Yeah, I could do Monday,
Monday the sixth.
Monday the sixth.
That should be fine.
We'd be relatively.
Yes, it would be the
Probably
only
The
item on
only
the
item.
agenda.
Yeah.
We don't need to have
Johnson.
another public hearing.
No,
You have something
No.
to say?
yep,
I
Just
can
vote.
Just to have everyone here, I
Yeah.
know Matt and
So, I
Amy
don't know.
wanted to be here.
Would earlier be better for you? Like, no, the games are all at 6. It's okay. He has like 27 games in the next 2 months.
So we can tentatively say we'll confirm with Commissioners Chesterton and Evans to make sure they are available so we can have the full planning commission in attendance tentatively June 6th at 7 PM. And that will be our one agenda item. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate everyone being flexible on that. That being said, we are moving on to new business and the appointment of the planning commission secretary. I'm going to turn that over to our
Okay,
city manager.
thank you, Chair Lindsay. So with me, our new Assistant City Manager, Warren Rothy. One of his responsibilities and duties with the city administration will look to really have those core focuses on planning, zoning, code, and building department within our city administration. And I thought it'd be best with Warren's background and expertise in several communities that he's worked in on master plans. As much as I would love to be involved and be a part of this body, and it's been really fun with all the planning commissions and opportunities. At least the good news is that I can still be involved as well. But I would recommend that this body consider appointing Warren Rothy as the secretary. And then this would be contingent upon that Mayor Hodges at the June 13th City Council meeting would recommend that the liaison or administration be Warren. So I hope the mayor will do that at the June 13th meeting. I did hear her say something about Warren might have to do a tap dance or something to
Yeah.
confirm.
Or Bella.
Yeah.
The zoning presentation.
Yeah, and so.
Well,
so-
tap dancing.
Yeah, so it's been a pleasure to work with you all, and be a part of these meetings, but Warren will be eventually your point of contact, and I think you're gonna be very impressed working with him. So, other than that, I would, if someone would be willing to entertain that motion to appoint Warren as Planning Commission Secretary contingent upon city or Mayor Hodges' approval at the June 13th council meeting.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by
I'll second.
Commissioner Coletta and then seconded by Commissioner Pataki. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Welcome. And thank you to City Manager Seisland for all of your work with us, especially through this process, all of your work here. I know there's been a ton of work behind the scenes, so many phone calls between the two of us. So
Absolutely.
I know
We'll
you'll.
continue to do so. Yep.
Truly appreciate that. Well,
Mhm.
thank you very much. And our next item is public comment on any non-agenda items. So, Mr. Porter?
Good evening once again. I have, I think what will be a brief comment about a non-agenda item, but it's something I think that should be on the planning commission agenda right now because it's on everybody's mind. And that is what's going to happen at Trombley School. And we know that the school district is going to divest itself of that property. And it ought to be the planning commission and the residents of Grossmont Park and the city administration that decide what the highest and best use is for that property. In the past, Grossmont Park has sort of done development by MOU, where the city engages in a series of memorandums of understanding with the developer for a very large project. And by the time anybody's paying attention, all these MOUs are signed and the residents are presented with a project that our city attorney advises the city can't change because we've got all these contracts with the developer. That process cannot happen with Trombley School. People will be enraged. So the planning commission needs to be getting citizen input now about what we want to happen with that property. We cannot go through this development by MOU. It just won't work. We need tax base, we need residents, we need more diverse housing, in my opinion. But we need to find out what the residents want in that property. That is I'm confident that's the biggest parcel of property that's going to be redeveloped since the Morrison estate on East Jefferson. It's bigger than the Art Center. And I think Morrison estate, which is like 25 years ago, is probably larger than that, but it's in the same league. In any event, you folks need to start getting citizen input about what's going to happen with that property. It can't be done behind closed doors, it can't be done by MOU, and it needs to take into account all the interests of all the taxpayers, and all the residents in the city. So it's a non-agenda item, but I urge this body to start thinking about it and start getting feedback from the community. Don't let it be done in secret. An example of why you shouldn't do that is the unhappiness over that property. And if you want to see unhappy residents, if we're saddled with something we don't want, or that is not a contributor to our tax base, you're going to see a lot of unhappy residents if you try to do this in secret again. Thanks.
Mr. Porter. I will say, just to address that comment, I was the PTO president at Trombley for 2 years. So I am a Terrier at heart. That school and that building is very near and dear to me. So I understand the passion from the community. And if I could chain myself to that building so no one touches it, I absolutely would. But I do agree that it's important to have input from the community if the school district is going to make steps towards divesting itself from that property. I have not had recent conversations with the superintendent about that. But I know that city council has had conversations with the school district and the administration. So again, it's the community south of Jefferson is very passionate as they should be about what the future use of Trombley Elementary School will be.
I have 2 Terrier kids too.
Yeah, me too.
But it will never be a school again unless it's a charter school or private school. And my own view is that's not the best use of that property.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. If there's no other public comment tonight, then if we could have a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So
Okay, that's it. So okay, Commissioner Bataki, seconded by Commissioner Stanpier. All in favor, say aye. All right, we are adjourned for the evening. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.